the Arabian Racehorse Podcast with Debbie Gary Capel
and Stephen Molyneux.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Arabian Racing Podcast. This week we'll be looking at three races, starting off with our most recent race at Newbury, the Emirates Breeders International Sprint Stakes. This produced a really quite impressive performance by a young filly called Munir, ridden by Holly Doyle, who won in a particularly fast time. So we'll be going through that in a minute. I'd like to welcome in Stephen Molyneux.
Hi Debbie, how are you?
Yeah, very good. Good to see you're back in the Emirates where you belong.
Where I belong, as far away from England as possible. Is that what you mean?
And Gary Capewell joins us from the studios today.
Yeah, I'm in Media City, so working. But you've got me for the next hour or so if need be.
Superb. Okay, so back to the Newbury race. Munir won the race in a very fast time of 1 minute 19 seconds 82. This is the fastest time since Nashwan Al Khalidia won over the same course and distance in the Zabeel Stakes in 2010. He won that in 1 minute 18:88. Gary, presumably you can remember that race. You would have been commentating, would you? And yeah. That was on good ground. Now, all the subsequent races we've had in between Zabeel races have been possibly on easier ground. A lot of our Dubai days, obviously, we know have been run in some fairly challenging weather conditions. And so some of those times have been on softer ground. Munir was running on good to soft at Newbury. It wasn't the soft ground that we'd feared when we reviewed the race at the time. So it'd be interesting. I think we'll start with our handicapper, Mr. Molyneux. What did you think of the race?
Yeah, they're obviously two very good three-year-olds, aren't they? They pretty much run to the level as they had on debut. Munir still looks green for me, not really knowing what to do when hitting the front, and on this occasion as well was obviously conceding the penalty to the runner-up. So she's clearly a very promising sort, and you mentioned the time pretty good as well. So a lot to like about her performance. I mean, just reflective of the time, she's obviously a three-year-old, so would be carrying a lot less weight than perhaps that Group 1 that you refer to. But no, still very, very impressive. Those the two that pulled clear, Munir and Al Khaliji, both look very useful sorts. And Abaya Athbar, who finished in third. Don't use the term yardstick as a general rule too well, but she is pretty solid contender back in third. And the sprint division with the Arabians can be a little bit hit and miss, as we don't have too many races over that trip, so never easy to assess. I mean, Abir Athbar, for example, has run over as far as 1.5 miles, but and she is a winner over 7, so I think she's a very solid prospect back in third. And hopefully the 2-3-year-olds get the chance to show what they can do in better company either this year or next.
And Gary? Yeah,
I think Stephen's made some good points. I mean, she was, both the first two were carrying, obviously, a good bit less weight than the other rivals, but it was more how they went through the race that I think was the most impressive thing, particularly the winner, who, as Stephen points out, still looks as though she's a bit of a work in progress. I mean, it was only a second start, so I suppose that's to be expected, but the way that she's travelled through the race against some horses with, solid handicap form in the 80s, and in Abaya Athbar's case, into the 90 bracket as well, hopefully it bodes well for both of their careers. There's a lot more to come from the winner, and the second obviously took a step forward as well, Al Khaliji. So two nice prospects going forward. Be interesting to see where we see them next. I'm not sure if they 3-year-olds are eligible for that group race back at Newbury, are they? So it'll be interesting to see where they end up. But they both look above average. Abaya Athbar ran well to a point. How much she will have sort of needed the race, I'm not just sure, but whether there was something still being left to work with, it was a solid run. And Malatham Athbar got the hang of things late on to finish a never near a fourth, and that was an encouraging effort as well.
Yeah, and certainly Malatham Athbar, good effort on his debut. He's nicely related. His full sister Bayan Athbar won in Belgium yesterday. And actually he's more of a lighter frame sort than some of the others out of the dam. So he certainly looks quite interesting. To go back to Abir Athbar, I know we've talked on this programme before about where she may end up. When I spoke to Pete in the paddock at Newbury, he said that actually the there's enough, he feels for her anyway, there's enough time between the Goodwood race and the Newbury Sprint race that she'll probably have a crack at both. Again, we did talk about it last week that she possibly would want quicker ground, and I think that's probably one of the main reasons why she wasn't perhaps quite as fleet-footed against these two fillies. Obviously, she was giving them some weight, and this would have been more of a prep race for her than anything else. So I think it was a fair effort to finish third, having led for a bit of the race. Speaking to James, he's very keen to try Munir in France. She's obviously, you know, one of his most progressive filly he's had out with 3-year-olds this year, although he's still got some more to come later on with those maidens that we've got coming up in August. Whether she'll get 1.25 miles, which is what she'll need to do in France. So the 3 big group races in France for 3-year-olds, you've got the Al Rayyan Cup at Deauville on August the 10th, the French Arabian Breeders' Challenge for fillies, which is the 3rd of September. That's a Group 2, sorry. And then, of course, obviously the 3-year-old fillies race at Saint-Cloud in October. They're all 1.25 mile races. I spoke to Holly Doyle afterwards, and she was a little bit hesitant to say whether she thought the horse would get 1.25 miles, but as we know, these Arabians can change quite quickly. I mean, she's certainly shown in her last 2 races a lot of speed. And with the AF Albahars, I've had a bit of a pedigree examination in the forthcoming edition of the magazine on Munir, and although they do certainly get 1.25 miles, Alsaca was a very good winner of the French Arabian Derby a couple of years ago, where he beat Tafe and Katab in a 3-way photo finish. His other 2 wins that year were both over 7 furlongs, and there's definitely a bias for that stallion stock to be better over sprint distances. But of course, his full brother, AF Albarak, who's now in this country, he got the Kahala Classic winner, AF Mayer. So I think it's just a case of time will tell, won't it, really? I don't know what you two think about her ability to get 1.25 miles.
Well, it's obviously an easy mile, wasn't it? She won at Lingfield. I think the point with the AF Al-Bahar progeny is that, yes, they do stay, as you say, you know, the odd one, but they kind of need time to stay. Ernst Ortel is obviously the main man when it comes to training his progeny, given that Khalid Khalifa Al Nabooda's used him a lot as a siren. AF Mahar, as he mentioned, won the Kahala, but again, it was a long progress to almost get there. Very speedy sorts to start off with, and it's possibly a case of strengthening them up over time as to when they get the distance. So it's not inconceivable. I think speed takes you a long way in the Arabians anyway, so it's got to be worth a try. Look, these 3-year-olds, the programme in England's not conducive to keeping them in their boxes, or, you know, not really conducive to keeping them here. So it's well worth James Owen having a crack over in France, as long as he can get there.
Yeah, indeed, and we'll come back to whether horses can go between countries at a later date. But moving on now to our forthcoming race tomorrow, the Wathba Stallions Cup, which is a 0 to 55 handicap, also over 1.25 miles. We're back at Lingfield for that race. We've actually got a race to compare it to. This race was run at Lingfield in 2019, when it was won by Callie May with Cork as the runner-up. Both of those reoppose tomorrow. And then we've also got quite a few nice improvers in the race as well. Gary, what did you think?
Yeah, open, isn't it? You mentioned Cork and Callie May. Obviously, we saw Cork a couple of weeks ago. Callie May we haven't seen for the best part of the year, but we know that she can go well fresh. Obviously, I think she's probably the more solid of that pair. I mean, Cork's had lots of opportunities, and I think 1 or 2 of them he sort of spurned, and I think he probably should have dropped on one by now, really. But obviously, he's got race fitness on his side, as to as the other stable companion, Kay Clare. But you know, Callie May goes fresh. We know that she loves the all weather, and yeah, I think she would be the pick of the Dillis Thomas trained trio. But again, we've got a real mix of either veterans, hardy veterans, you know, the likes of Norseman, Al Jawar, we mentioned Kay Clare and Cork, and indeed Callie May, and that mix of sort of horses that have got proven form, the likes of, you know, Zane's Hyperion, I suppose to a lesser extent Kayak and Stonehenge, albeit with Kayak he's probably in the right kind of grade again now. And then those horses that have only had a couple of runs, you know, the likes of Aloof, Amy and and Run the Risk. Obviously, we tipped Samawat as well last time out, when I was a bit disappointed with her, to be honest, that day, which was a little bit of a concern. But she's dropped down to a career low mark now as well, hasn't she? So there's got to be a chance that hopefully she can get competitive at least. I think Run the Risk would be my sort of tentative pick. He took a big step forward at Windsor when he finished third just over a fortnight ago. Obviously, quite a few of them, ran in that race. So there's lots of bits of interlinking form. The thing that interested me most when I was reading the race card, though, about Zane's Hyperion, handicapper now gives him a chance to break the maiden tag, Debbie. I hope that wasn't a dig at the handicapper.
Well, he's been there and thereabouts, hasn't he? He's been very consistent, but he's just not quite got his head in front. So I see Stephen's giving him a couple of pounds off this time.
Yeah, well, he just kept running so well, really, last year, didn't he? I think his last 5 starts have been off a mark of 57, which is obviously what you're alluding to. And he had a couple of cracks at it this year. And I mean, £2 is probably neither here nor there, really, is it? It's his easiest grade of race so far, isn't it? This 0 to 55. It's been 0 to 65s and above since then. So he's definitely one of 3 that I would say has got the potential to be better than their marks. There could be 1 or 2 others that revive. But I mean, Amy and Run the Risk are the 2, really, aren't they, from that run last time? Both were making their handicap debuts in that Windsor run. It was a higher grade of race. The 2 horses that beat them were both rated in the 60s. They're obviously not in this Lingfield contest. And both horses really were still learning on the jobs. It was kind of one of those that, I've given them obviously a chance to run in handicaps. And although they finished 3rd and 4th, you wouldn't actually mind sticking another £3 or £4 onto them on the back of that last run, because you've just got that feeling that they were improving, and they're going to improve again for that last run. So they're 2 of the more interesting ones, and I think if either of them take a step forwards, they'll improve. They'll go close. I think Amy is perhaps a little bit more laboured of the 2. She can look a little bit hard work, as she has done in all her starts. Hopefully she will improve and get better. And Run the Risk, hard to know whether he was in the right place at Windsor. He was isolated for a good period of that race, wasn't he? But the eventual 1st and 2nd did kind of drift over more towards that far rail. I can't recall what happened on the rest of the Windsor card. Obviously, when it gets soft, they do all go over towards that far side. But it was definitely a run that suggested that he could improve. I think both of those 2. It's probably going to take a fair level of revival from one of the others to usurp that pair.
Yeah, it certainly looks a competitive race for the grade, and that is partly down to you, Stephen. It has to be said, But to be fair, these horses have they've still got to take the advantage that you've given them, and some of them just might have reached a point where they're not so interested in being racehorses now, which is possibly a point that we made about Cork. I mean, Cork is now £10 lower than he was when he was just about second, but certainly in that race, his little ears pricked forward when he hit the front, and he just didn't put it up again to his stablemate Callie May. So I mean, look, on previous form he could be massively well in, but with I agree with Gary with the fact that his resolve has looked a little bit wanting at times. So anyway, look, we'll find out tomorrow who's got the best form for the day, really. Stonehenge, a little word on him. Obviously he's coming back from an injury, and he ran okay when on his reappearance. So this will be more sort of his thing. Pete's obviously got 5 runners in the race, which most of which are for 4 of them are for different owners. So it's a hard task for him to keep all his owners happy. I don't think I'd fancy that job, to be fair. So good luck to Pete on all levels, really. I'm looking forward to seeing a Loof run. Obviously, we're in this slightly weird situation this year where horses can be rated after just one race, which obviously is going to change again next year when we've got more races. But she looked a really big, strong filly, and probably is going to need this and possibly even another run before we really got a measure of where she's at. But she's certainly a nice type. And good luck to Steve with her, actually. And yes, obviously we've talked about Amy and Run the Risk. They're the horses to take away from from the Windsor race, and they certainly look to be improvers. So yeah, it looks an exciting race tomorrow. Looking forward to it. Gary, are you travelling down for this one or not?
No, it's a little bit too far for a mile and a quarter race for my liking. That'd be about 5 hours down to Lingfield, I should imagine. It used to be 3.5 when I lived in the Midlands. Now I'm a bit further north. It'd be probably 300 plus miles and 5 hours worth of driving. So no, John Hunt, you'll be in capable hands tomorrow. I sent John the race card. He said I wasn't expecting to see so many of them, but he was also quite glad that there wasn't any in Shadwell colours. He was expecting 6 or 7 of those, I think.
Oh, indeed. Well, certainly a bit closer to home for you will be our race at Doncaster on Saturday. Will you be there?
No, I'm working again, I'm afraid. So that was one that's been sort of put in quite late, wasn't it? It was added to the fixture list. So yeah, no, unfortunately, I'm not there. I'm at Newmarket on Saturday.
HQ. Well, lucky you, Gary. We should be. I'll be driving up to Doncaster, which actually, to be fair, is about the same distance to me as Lingfield. So although mentally it feels like farther away, actually it's probably going to be a quicker journey, I think. So unfortunately, because of time constraints and putting this program together, we're going to have to preview the Doncaster race at the entry stage, and we'll be looking at the results of these 2 races next week. But so the LC for Beach handicap is a 0 to 75 over a mile and a quarter. I think 5 or 6 of these horses entered, ran in the Doncaster race. We had a 0 to 90 over a mile and a half a couple of weeks back. So Gary, your thoughts?
Yeah, like you say, a couple of those, the likes of, Balkis, she was second, obviously, in that race. You've also got a couple of the others as well, Jarhez, also G1 as well. I think there might have been one other as well, wasn't there? Yes, yeah, and a couple more. Yeah, Thayer Athbar as well. So interesting little contest. I think the 2 that perhaps interested me, I mean, Balkis I do like. I think she's entitled to go close, not only on that form, but again, how she went through that race. I think there's going to be more to come from her. But the 2 that sort of interested me most were Abkari and in particular Sahis, who we saw win at Chelmsford quite impressively earlier on in the season. But as I say, we don't know who's going to be turning up just yet. But I think Sahis is the one for me that certainly impressed with how he went through that race at Chelmsford. Obviously, he's very lightly raced. He took a big step forward that day, and it'll be interesting to see how he gets on his handicap debut. But yeah, we'll wait to see who turns up. But at this stage, I think I like the claims of Sahis most.
And Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, it's very competitive, isn't it, with that time of year where the 0 to 75 at Newbury ordinarily would have taken place. Obviously, that's over 7 furlongs. This is a good bit further, but a lot of the same sort of horses would be running in both, and hence why we've got such a competitive race. Gary's mentioned the horse Sahis from the Chelmsford race and Al Simsam as well, both lightly raced 4-year-olds who were entitled to improve. I think the Doncaster race is going to be a lot stronger. We're going to see Zayn Zyperian obviously at Lingfield in a lesser grade. So the horses the pair pulled clear of that day were probably not of a Balkis standard, for example. I maintain Thayer Athbar's got plenty of ability, maybe yet to show it all on the track, but I think that horse will continue to improve as he gains experience in racing. He's just sort of bits and pieces of his race that have looked impressive, and then he's ended up fading away. So I think he's definitely got improvement in him. And I thought the run of Autar was actually pretty good last time as well. I know it was a funny race. It was the conditions race that the horse ran in, and possibly a little bit flattered, having been well placed in that contest. But I thought it was an improved performance. That handicap racing doesn't reflect as much because it was that type of race. But she finished 5th on that occasion behind Farha. Whether that was down to her position, I'm not sure. But she did finish ahead of the 108 rated Alcacer, who was quite clearly not in any sort of form that day. But that one performance from Autar suggested to me that she was potentially improving, and that certainly wouldn't rule her out. And then you've got a fewer down the bottom there, Al-Tabari. He improved as racing went on last year. I think it was his third run where he gained the first of 2 victories. It's his third run at Doncaster on Saturday, so that could see him improve. And not forgetting Falcon de Roche either, who was a winner last time, but similar comments to Sahis, and that this race does strike has been a little bit better. So I think there are plenty of chances in there, and for once, good to see it not completely dominated by Shadwell, or at least when we see the declarations, it's unlikely to be dominated by Shadwell.
Yes, absolutely. It's good to see the races starting to form, an easier and more competitive. I think probably because we've got less races, it's made these races more competitive. And as we said earlier, some of the handicap marks that you've amended of late in the more experienced, older, lower level handicaps have certainly helped that. And this race, we've got quite a lot of young horses, and I think it's fair to mention, albeit that at the moment this is not at the moment, but it's a 0 to 75. Obviously, with the extended handicap situation, you've got 2 77 rated horses in there, which if they get declared, they'll be carrying £2 higher. But these 4-year-olds, this is the course where we run the UK Arabian Derby, and it's over the same trip of 1.25 miles. It's not inconceivable that some of these might line up to take their chances, particularly if, who knows, with COVID, we end up in a situation where it's harder for the international horses to come over. So I think it's it'll be an interesting race to watch from that angle as well.
Definitely, and like you say, there's a hopefully it doesn't happen, but there could be a chance of a big prize for one of these 4-year-olds later on in the season. And we see horses that traditionally it's been quite a small field, actually, in fairness, the UK Arabian Derby. So, or at least the last few years it has anyway. So, if one of these horses can progress a little bit, there's a good opportunity for them to at least get in the money and, scoop a fair bit of prize money as well, if they are even declared for that race, obviously. The entries for the Derby are on August the 11th this year. So obviously we'll know a bit more then. The winner of one of the reasons I think for the small fields obviously has been the fact that the winner of the French Arabian Derby is invariably entered and has doubled up, I think, for 3 or 4 of the last years now. But as you say, there's good prize money down to 6. And it's not inconceivable that one of these horses or several of these horses might take a chance to pick up the prize money lower down. And certainly Lulwa, who was 3rd last year, she's clearly progressing. She's won since. And again, we talked about Bayan Athba winning in Belgium. Lulwa was 2nd in a listed race yesterday. So beating Freddie PY, who seems to be quite a useful horse in his own right. So, there's Abir Athba, of course, had run in this race a few years ago too. So in the Derby. So it would be nice to think that some of these might show up and become some stalwarts of our racing in years to come.
Yeah, they'd have to have a go at it, wouldn't they? There's one Derby, as we quite often say, and obviously in the thoroughbreds, and if you're remotely good enough, you have a go. Even if you're not good enough, as Gary says, there's probably 4 or 5 runners. Even if the French can travel en masse, it's not likely to be a big field. So I'd say there'll be a lot of trainers that have definitely got their eye on the Doncaster race, and indeed the Goodwood race, which is even closer to the forefront of our minds, isn't it?
It certainly is, and we'll be doing a Goodwood special, a programme entirely devoted to that race in the coming weeks. And anyway, so that brings the end to today's programme. We'll reconvene to review the Lingfield and Doncaster races next week. So thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you very much. Look forward to watching these next two races this week, but also reviewing them next week as well.
And thank you to Stephen.
No problem. See you next week.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.